Welcome to Detective Diaries, brought to you by Private Detectives Answers Investigation. If you are captivated by the art of deduction, the thrill of solving the unsolvable, or the enigmatic world of private investigation, you've just found your new favourite podcast. Detective Diaries is where secrets unravel and the truth is always a clue away. Presented by Private Detectives Answers Investigation. Each episode contains offbeat conversations about the real people involved in investigation.
You are listening to part 2 of my wonderful conversation with Professor Emma Short, exploring the themes of cyber-psychology. Part 1 explored the foundations of cyber-psychology and the hidden psychological impact of life online. But don't worry, you can jump into part 2 right here. But with that said, do be sure to go back and listen to part 1 as we give you deeper context into the world of cyber-psychology. Enjoy. We're obviously talking about tools. Open source intelligence and social media. We've talked about how that perhaps blurs some lines, but do you think that will cause people to perhaps become their own investigators?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that this does happen, you know, and again, you know, we've seen it in popular media, because social media creates a second tier of investigators, the crowd, you know, and we talked about those group dynamics, that, you know, being pulled into something that feels meaningful, that gives you a sense of belonging and identity, is something that as human beings we all want. And if you've got a job to do, i.e. you're sleuthing over a particular thing, for example, you know, it feels really purposeful. So, I mean, we've seen a number of these things happen where it goes really, really well, where the crowd does detect something and bring it to the attention of the police. But we've also seen it, you know, sort of where it turns out really badly, where vigilantism, which is really cyber. I think someone's put those two words together, but I can't think how it sounds, cyber and vigilante. But, and that was the case that was in a Netflix series about the Cecil Hotel, where the crowd had analysed every moment, every frame of the footage that remained of Elisa Lam, who died, and thought they had identified the person who may have been linked to her death. And no one was linked to her death in the end. It was a tragic accident. But they named this person, they pursued him, and, you know, he talks about it in the series about having his life. At that time, I think for him it felt catastrophic. You know, let's hope very much he's sort of come back from that. But yeah, the crowd and open source data, those two make a powerful combination.
And again, it's that immediate levels of access have never been more so open now than before. I can't imagine being that person villainised for something which, of course, is so unknown to them or has just randomly come out of the blue. It's not predicted. It's not something that you can see coming.
Yes, yeah, and we do see it all the time, you know, things like, you know, helping a missing persons case is a TikTok phenomenon. The detectives, the ghost hunters, really sort of out there, looking at the data and pulling enormous amounts of views and followers. So there is something compelling about open source data and group work.
the case to be involved. Oh, I've seen this online, so I've got to give my view and opinion here.
Yes.
But I suppose it can be a negative.
Yes.
Again, just saying this is my view can be quite damaging, I suppose, especially where perhaps it should be a professional or someone who perhaps has the background, knowledge, expertise to answer.
Yeah, and someone who's conscious of critically looking at the material they're looking at, because there is so much misinformation out there. I do think there are some very good centres, you know, like Bellingcat and so on, where you can kind of, you know, there are several, you know, like that now, where you know it's fact-checked.
Yes.
And we do need to, in order to believe things and act upon them, we should check they're true.
I wonder what level of information in the future will be misinformation, because of course it's so high now already. I wonder if, using an example, you have an AI giving you that misinformation. Obviously I know it exists now, but en masse you have the AI giving you the misinformation, to which then the general public take as that must be gospel, that must be fact. And I can't imagine that's going to be a wonderful environment. And what do we do at that point? Is there a way to come back from that, do you think?
I think a lot of it's about digital literacy. I really, really do, and critical thinking, because we need to fact check. We need to stop and wait a beat. You know, if you have an emotional reaction to something you see online, it's really important not to react automatically or immediately, because it's probably what's been engaged with. It's not your thinking, it's your feelings.
Yes. So a digesting of the information first to then react.
But we are also really susceptible, you know, as human beings, whether or not we're critical human beings who kind of are waiting that beat. You know, every human being is susceptible to what's called a pattern hunger. So when you have a lot of open source data, or OSINT, which is really good, and I've seen a lot of baseball caps recently, so it's clearly a growing movement. We look for patterns in the data. Like we look for patterns in clouds. I know that's quite a cheesy kind of comparison to make, but we look for patterns. We think we're seeing them. And most of us, if we were not triangulating our beliefs or our findings with at least one other person, would make erroneous conclusions about a pattern in the data.
Do you think then that the ability for someone to critically think is being reduced because we have an acceptance to view what we see in front of us in that digital space?
I think unless we've got methods and tools and a strategy by which to look at the data, and we are sticking to those steps and we are checking with other people, I think it is very easy to come to the wrong conclusions. More than one mind is necessary. I think unless you've got a program that's got sort of pre-programmed parameters that's looking at stuff, but we will see patterns, and this is the problem with surveillance generally. You know, when we talk about where is the line, you know, I think the line between watching and surveillance is a really fine line.
Yes.
And for individuals, the minute they start not just noticing but interpreting, assigning motives to people, constructing a case about them that they have completely constructed themselves and are projecting onto someone else.
Yes.
You know, at that point, you're no longer just watching.
No.
And you may make all sorts of erroneous judgments about this person, what they're like, what they're doing, what they deserve. I think we've got to be really careful. But there's also the thing that if you get involved in this stuff and you draw erroneous opinions, but they're funny, you know, you get all of that social validation, you know, from the group from whom you want respect, you know, from that herd. So it's a really compelling environment. You've got all this data, you can impose patterns on it that kind of basically are projected from you, and you get validation and social sort of affirmation by doing it. So it's a really compelling thing.
It kind of reminds me of the deviance amplification cycle, in the sense that once it's there, it's in that circle and it's just going to amplify and amplify, because it's sort of, to use a better term for it, it's kind of everyone saying the same thing, or it gets escalated, and therefore before you know it, that, as you say, is implanted onto someone else, accepted. I'll go with the herd on this. The lack of critical thinking doesn't question it or perhaps review what there is, and then it just changes into something else. So
you're making me think here. I mean, it's probably because tonight there is an episode of Celebrity Traitor, and that's clearly the high point in my day. I might be alone in that, I don't know. This herd thinking, where it's not just sort of critical evaluation of information that make you less susceptible to the herd. It is a sense of personal agency and a sense of personal worth. And I think we need to build this in people. If you look at Celebrity Traitors, for example, they will often vote, everyone might vote for someone else to be evicted. I'm sorry if we're kind of excluding you from the conversation. Would you like to give a kind of an outline of what Celebrity Traitor is before I carry on?
I tell you what, why don't we hear it from you, actually? Go on, Emma. Lay it all to ground first. So Celebrity Traitors, obviously popular at the moment. Celebrities on the show where one person nominated a traitor, and then essentially, I don't know the rest of it ins and outs, but as far as I'm concerned, they have to try and guess.
I'm literally just learning. I'm only 4 episodes into the whole kind of concept.
Oh, you could probably tell me more though.
Okay,
so
it's basically where 3 people are selected as traitors who will gradually, one by one, pick off the faithfuls. And obviously they want to find the traitors so they're not kind of, killed in their beds, which they're not killed, they're just given a letter and
Yes.
sent home.
Yes.
And their agent's probably thinking, damn, they're not going to get the full whack.
Yeah.
But you've got no information to go on because they've literally just been nominated by the host.
Okay.
No data. But people have strong opinions, and that's basically, I think, based on like or dislike.
So right.
And when you watch the episodes that are made with the general public, quite often one person will be dominant in that group, and the herd will be swayed. They will all end up voting for the same person.
Sure.
But if you look at the celebrity one, almost everyone has their own idea of who it is, based on no data, but they believe it is the right person.
Yes.
And they will stick to their guns. They won't be swayed by the herd. And that has to be about a feeling of self-worth.
Right.
Or experience of being validated by others as an individual.
Sure.
So I think, to resist misinformation, to resist the negative effects of the herd, it's not just critical digital literacy. It is about working on everyone's feeling of self-worth, because every individual matters. Where do we build that in more? That actually everyone is worthy of an opinion and everyone is valued.
Absolutely. Everyone's voice is as valuable as the next.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's quite interesting when you say about celebrity traitors, because the pictures of Alan Carr sweating coming to mind. I heard that in the article recently. The assumptions on everyone's going to think I'm a traitor just because of my natural disposition.
Sweating,
I'm sweating in it. Sweating a lot.
Thank goodness there aren't too many menopausal women on there, because we'd all be voted up.
So who do you want to get through before?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just so. I'm watching it. It was almost like watching sort of something under a microscope. I'm just watching it all with such interest. I don't. However it unfolds, it will be wonderful.
Part of the drama, how it unfolds.
Yeah.
So, obviously, many crimes we call cyber, cyber fraud, cyber stalking, cyber harassment.
Yeah.
They've obviously existed long before the internet. What truly then makes a crime perhaps cyber-enabled, rather than just something that occurs digitally or in a digital form?
Yeah. Well, you've got kind of, I think, the classic split. The language and the jargon evolves all the time. So, I'm sorry if I'm out of date here, but I still work with the cyber-enabled and the cyber-dependent distinction. So cyber-dependent is where the crime couldn't happen unless there was technology.
Right.
So it's often machine to machine. So it might be things like hacking, because you can only hack a computer. You can't hack a person with a computer.
Sure.
So it might be, things like DDoS. The sort of attacks. They are cyber-dependent crimes, machine to machine through a network. Everything else pretty much is cyber-enabled, i.e. it's about how technology changes the scale and the capability of the crime. So frauds and scams, they're cyber-enabled now. Harassment, stalking, child sexual exploitation, hate speech.
Very topical.
All of those things, image-based sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, unfortunately, has always occurred, but now there is an additional sort of tool, which is image-based.
And I suppose then it is another case of being able to look at the original aspects of the crime, how it's forming, how a new motive and technique can advance into a cyber-enabled crime, and then being able to perhaps tackle it on both fronts in that sense, because I'm sure, we sort of mentioned a couple of topics there where it becomes cyber-enabled. It's a lot more difficult to track in that sense. Whereas the human side, there might be perhaps more of a trail physically. And so I can imagine that could be quite difficult when a crime perhaps transcends into being cyber-enabled. Do you have to completely, because I know you work with obviously a lot of investigators and sort of police with techniques, does it completely uproot how they deal with it just because it's turned cyber-enabled? Or is it kind of a transition into, we've tackled it on the human front, we're looking at the cyber side now, or is it one and the same?
It's interesting you say that, because I think digital evidence, although it's often transient, it can be altered, it can be removed. So it's got to be collected quickly.
Yes.
But you are more likely to leave a residue of criminal behaviour online than you are offline to some extent.
Right.
In that you can literally track people's behaviour, but you are relying on having a really technically informed cyber investigator or a police officer who has those skills. I think it has improved a lot. Quite a lot of people used to shy away from it the minute it was cyber because they just felt de-skilled. But actually, you've got a very rich seam of evidence to pull on from cyber communications, from digital communications. It's interesting. I mean, I think less and less we're separating things like in harassment and stalking. We're not separating sort of physical and cyber in the same sort of way as we did.
Right.
Because basically in things like stalking, every case has a cyber element now. Of course it does, because we are so dependent.
It's in everyday lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah. And so I guess it's how it comes around to the case prosecution or the evidence, putting it all together. As you say, there's no longer that separation of here's what they did physically, here's what they did. It's all one.
It would be part of the evidential case.
Right.
But it's one of those things, again, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about how technology and automation is really helpful in some ways, but it doesn't always match human experience. So, for example, for an investigator trying to compile the evidence of a case of cyber stalking, they might have 20,000 screenshots and messages to report, to deposit, to put into, to construct. One human being has to put all that together. Some of the systems support them, some of them don't, but we're still looking at one human being who's having to work through a volume of evidence, in cyber harassment that is so much greater than it would have been if it was just physical stalking.
Fascinating. I think it's obviously a case may come to a point where there isn't actually a physical presence anymore. A cyber-enabled crime is truly demonstrated through the evidential chain of cyber-related documents, testimonies, whatever it may be. So do we then get to a point where everything is just cyber-orientated, i.e., for example, a crime when committed, there isn't a human element involved anymore. It is someone who has orchestrated this truly through whatever technologies or systems that they utilise. And how do we then combat that?
Tough one.
Sorry, that was a little bit redundant.
But I mean, look at where, they hit the headlines every week, don't they?
Yes.
And it's people who are bringing down whole systems through, hacking, which is cyber dependent, obviously. The NCA published figures, didn't it? So I think last year, that most of them are teenagers. And they're bringing down these multinationals, which is kind of thing, this is what we need to work on, kind of building that confidence, building that idea of maybe challenge and engagement in the cyber world can be one about, a protective action, kind of how can we beat the hackers?
Yes.
How can you be the one to work out where the back door is so we can protect it? I do think there is a real need to engage people more.
You're so right. I think, I can't remember which company it was, but they were talking about ethical hacking.
Yes.
And I think a lot of companies are looking at this now, but they'll invite these people with the talents to say, hey, come and destroy our piece of work here. We want to see what the problems are, and there's probably a job for you at the end of it. And what a wonderful motive to perhaps bring out those people who are looking at going into the darker side.
Yeah, the very people whose curiosity is taking them to sort of, push through lines, break through security walls. These are the people, who may well respond to those sorts of calls. And I think there are some out there. I can't remember. Hang on, I've written it down. I think there are a couple of initiatives out there that have been put together by the NCA that are deliberately trying to kind of involve young people in sort of ethical hacking and kind of getting involved in that. And you think, let's just push more of that.
Absolutely.
It's not going to be about baseball camps at the weekend anymore.
No.
It's this is what a lot of people want to be doing.
And opening that door to the conversation as early as possible, again, is that important thing, isn't it? Before they go off and see something that perhaps they shouldn't, which then leads them onto a path of, I can apply this in a criminal world and do what I want to do, perhaps. So, no, interesting. So, if online crime then operates through networks rather than hierarchies, how does that sort of change our whole idea of investigation and prevention?
Okay, this again, it's quite interesting. It's about distributed systems, isn't it? That people aren't connected in a hierarchy. There are a series of loose connections and associations. So there isn't a boss at the top quite often in a lot of crime. So if it's operating through networks rather than hierarchies, there has been a rearrangement of the criminal world since this has started. And these networks are resilient and they're agile, because if one node gets taken out, the whole thing doesn't collapse because there are a series of loose connections. So the only way really to investigate things like that is through mapping the connections, mapping that association in order to try and understand what's happening. So investigators need to map ecosystems rather than identify kingpins, where crime is based entirely online in this way. And there will be probably problems of jurisdiction. Some people might be in, I don't know, Manchester. Some people might be in America, some people might be in Russia, who knows, but they will be distributed around the world. So mapping that ecosystem is important, but then the jurisdictional challenges of doing that work are enormous.
Yes, it becomes much more international than ever before, I can imagine. And how you pinpoint where these cells, groups, whatever they might be, and how they operate, it blurs the lines completely again as to one person who may distinctly be in the group chats or the logs or whatever it may be as someone who has the position of authority could just be a figurehead in an entire operation. So I can imagine, again, another layer of trying to peel back the sort of true origins of the group, of the crime.
Yes. And do they know who each other are?
Exactly.
They may not.
Exactly.
So, you've got a philosophical shift, in the way it's kind of structured. You've got a change necessary for investigation and policing. And it's just about understanding who's in the loop, really. Maybe no one's in charge.
It's all just going around in a circle and there are no orders.
I think the challenges are enormous, but it also means that sort of, investigators, have a changing skill set. They need to be able to be data scientists and behavioural analysts, not just sort of those investigative skills that they used to have.
Yes, problem solving now incorporates analysis, and not only just how can we get from A to B and solve the problem, but what are the underlying factors here which could help answer something a bit more grandiose here in terms of motive, in terms of how they deliberately approach this through criminal ways, utilising technology in doing so. Fascinating.
It is, and I do. This is a shout out to all the police analysts out there who I think are the unsung heroes in crime at the moment. They often work in isolation because there's only funding for, say, one or two, but they can find you the answers. If you are able to engage with them, and I just think their contribution to policing at the moment is often under-recognised and certainly underfunded. Because they have those skills we were talking about. They can map things, they can identify patterns, because they will construct parameters that won't distract them, and they will do it systematically. So they are great people.
As you say, the unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So how then does online misogyny function as both sort of ideology and crime, and sort of going back to how we were talking about teaching to look out for the signs? How would you help people to try and recognise this when they're seeing it?
Okay. Do we want to start with the ideology and the crime, or how to recognise it? Where would you like to?
Let's do the ideology first. I think would make sense.
Well, there is an ideology behind it, which is kind of what makes it sort of so dangerous. Like many forms of terrorism, have an ideology behind them. And this is a belief system that frames women as inferior or deceptive or dangerous. And there is a movement around it, but it's often dressed up as self-improvement, about maybe men's rights. The word incel is embraced by some
Yep.
and rejected by others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a language that's full of hierarchy, you know, alphas, betas, high value, low value. And those are assigned to individuals, you know, and internalised. So what happens is people who identify with that kind of in-self thinking is that it gives them an identity and an explanation for failure.
Right.
So it's not me, it's the system that's stacked against me.
Right.
It's these sort of these terrible women or diversity or inclusion that's keeping me down. And what happens is that shared grievance becomes amplified and is rewarded. Expression of hostility and grievance is rewarded.
Right.
Expressions of empathy are kind of rejected. So there is, again, this kind of amplification and the building up of this grievance that becomes a shared identity and a shared language. But it's also a crime space.
Yes.
So when that ideology justifies acts that spill into the criminal or the violence or harassment or coordinated pylons, for example, that's when you kind of tipped into the crime area where that dialogue is justifying acts of crime. You know, and certainly, you know, we have seen cases, there are cases around where there are certainly crimes that are motivated by misogyny.
I think the problem again is that those people who perhaps, I'm not saying they necessarily had those views in the first place, but perhaps had thought it or...
It's radicalisation.
Radicalisation, isn't it? And having that point of view demonstrated through the TikTok reel, the Instagram reel. Oh, he's saying exactly what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Must be right then. I must be right. This must be the viewpoint that I'm not being taught at in education, of course, because it's not say the wrong view, but it's something that is inherently wrong from the offset, becomes that gospel conversation of this is what I know, this is what is being said. It must be true.
Yeah, this explains everything that's happening to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting though that, as you say, it becomes that conversation of me versus the world, because the world is wrong.
Yes.
And they can take the standpoint of I'm here to change the world into something which is better, when actually the better is quite a few paces behind where we are now and going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And that self-fulfilling prophecy perhaps then of instilling, this is how I'm going to do right, this is how I'm going to change, when you're completely barking up the wrong tree, let's say. That's fascinating. So then how does that change our idea of investigation and prevention then, would you say? Difficult, I imagine, because you're dealing with that self-belief of people who, kind of going back to what I said before about their bubble being burst, you know, truth and reality put in front of someone, but because it's a warped mentality which is instilled by this herd mentality, you're not going to change my view. It's kind of saying, good luck trying to change it. I'm so engrossed in this now, there's no way to step down and step back from the platform.
Yeah, I think it is really difficult, you know, and I know there is some work, you know, that is being done and has been done with people who have become radicalised as incels, that has been quite effective.
Okay.
And it really is quite core working with sort of attitudes and feelings about self-worth. Because the grievance comes from a place of, I don't know, feelings of injustice, of self-loathing, you know, and there are lots of things that can be worked with there. So I mean, there are real movements to try and intervene. But there are also people in that group who are not just vulnerable individuals, they want to hurt people.
Right.
And I think it's really difficult to identify who those dangerous actors are. But the same sort of methods of detection and sort of assessment, you know, can apply here as well. There will be a lot of people in that forum who are affected, who are radicalised, but there will only be a handful who are dangerous individuals.
Right.
Their message, however, is generally damaging and dangerous. So
Yes.
I'm not saying that they're not dangerous, because they are dangerous. You know, the fact it's affecting, you know, public narrative, attitudes to women, that these may be the first influences a lot of young men have about women, it may form their opinions and therefore their treatment of women. That is terrifying.
It is. It really is. And I suppose it's again the control, because how can we police such a space where it's all out there, and as we've said earlier today, once it's out there, there's no kind of getting it back.
Yeah. And how do we disrupt those networks? Because they're distributed.
Yes, yes. And once it becomes sort of, to use a term, cult following, if you will, has it already gone beyond the realms of being stopped, and is it a case of just trying to minimise the fallout of that?
I mean, I'm a big believer in, everything goes round a cycle. Not everything just grows exponentially forever. I do think there is ebb and flow. And I'm always an optimist that things can be pulled back, that things can be improved, even if it's only for a temporary time before it erupts
before
again.
something else changes and takes its place. But
I do think there are things that can be done, and like we're all over things like other forms of terrorism, and there have been really effective interventions. And in my view, this ideology is just as damaging as those forms of terrorism, and I'm certain that similar principles can be applied.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I wonder what the next sort of incel group would be. For example, we've heard the news on the anti-Semitism, the rise of right, for example. Yes. What would be the next thing? Obviously, it's hard to predict, and no one probably should ever predict, because then that might give someone an idea. But I wonder, is there going to be a point where there is a breaking point, where the ceiling has been met, and there is no more space for these views, or people perhaps seeing it's been quite intolerable of that difference? Does it all sort of implode at that point? It's hard to say, isn't it?
Well, we see eruptions, don't we? Things like Southport, where it's a similar expression, isn't it? Where there's a shared grievance. My life is terrible. I feel lesser. So do I. We have this shared grievance, and it's their fault. And whoever's fault it is seems to change in terms of public consciousness. And we have seen it erupt from time to time recently. And we know a lot of that was accelerated by social media.
Yes. And misinformation is part of it, isn't it?
Because that shared grievance, that emotional contagion, doesn't take a few weeks to build in a group where you meet up once a week. It can happen in hours or overnight through social media, where a post is put down that people respond to emotionally. They think that sounds the same for me. I'm furious. We have a shared mission, and we have identified the group who we are blaming. And it's dangerous, really dangerous, and terrifying for the groups who are caught in those crosshairs.
And I think it will always be difficult for introducing someone to an online space. And as you say, I think that the important thing is to have conversations on this, just to say, you're going to see these things, you're going to hear about these things. It might not even be a human behind that comment, that message, the bots. And how do we teach young people who are already so exposed to that? I don't want to be a policymaker, that's all I can say.
Through conversations. I mean, I would love to be in a position where I could sit alongside people who are not my age group, who are not my demographic, for a day, and just sit with them and observe the stream they're getting. Because I am certain their reality, their social media reality, their news reality is entirely different from mine.
Yes.
I mean, we know about these sort of echo chambers, but I bet your data, from the moment you wake up and you start looking at those reels, everyone's day is very different. So we need to maybe be sharing our personal experiences of our online feeds, so we can talk about it.
Yes, to have analysis and conversation on the differences and the things to be aware of.
Yeah, it's like, why are you angry about this thing? Why are you concerned about this thing? Why are you furious with these people? Well, if we could see what everyone else is seeing day by day, we would understand what was on their minds and why.
Yes. And then being able to plan and tackle and look at that. I'm always just envisioning taking away the phone off a young person just to say no more time tonight. You've had your time. So very interesting. So obviously we've talked quite a lot then about the current sort of aspects in place, current laws needing to keep up with the digital world and environment. What really can be done? Because obviously policing it, as we've discussed, is difficult. Can we really deter cyber-enabled crime? Or does the digital environment sort of undermine traditional deterrence?
I think deterrent's much harder to make visible,
Yes.
to make apparent. We talked about the lack of an effective guardian
Yes.
in the online space.
Yes.
It's true. There is a lack of an effective guardian.
Yeah.
I think we can teach individual literacy skills. I think we have to push much, much harder for responsible design. I really do. We have to have many, many more conversations with industry about how it's designed. And we have to have dialogues, I think, in the family. It goes back to sort of that early modelling of what is trust. How do we manage our online lives and our privacy? So I think it comes from the family and just accepting the fact that actually communication, in intimate spaces like in families, isn't just physical, it's in digital spaces. So how do we show trust through digital connections with family and children? How do we respect privacy in that way? It's like, I don't know, I'm going to use another crass analysis, a sort of analogy. With children, you expect them to close their doors to you and have privacy, as they get that little bit older and they're not likely to fall out of the cot and stuff like that. And yet we have access to their phones.
Yes.
And actually, it's the same relationship. How do we negotiate those thresholds and separateness? So I think there's a lot of that happening. There are so many forms of prevention for cybercrime that we could go on about, but I do worry about the lack of an effective guardian.
Yes. And I think you're so right as well, because the conversations don't tend to happen. I think about my conversations being a younger person years ago, being introduced to technology. The kind of safety and the guidances we talk about there never really existed when the internet was first coming to light at all. It was a wonderful tool and hey, look, there's going to be another world to go out there and view. And now it seems like I'm in a position where every article perhaps I view, I'm always thinking, I probably should go look at another news source just to see if I'm getting the right facts here, or to see someone else's point of view on how it's reported. And while, of course, my job and the inherent work I do is giving me that mind and platform to do so, not many people are given that guidance at a young age. And certainly having that open dialogue, I think, from day one would have shaped my narrative a lot quicker then than it does now. Early introduction, isn't it? Just in speaking to people about it and talking about it. We have to talk about it. We can't just sit here and accept now. It's too far evolved, perhaps, to not have these important conversations. Do you think they'll ever happen with the big industries, the operators of all of us?
I live in hope.
I'm with you. I'm with you. It's it'll be a difficult one, but then again, those landscapes may change again, and new people coming to the forefront, we might be able to speak with about it.
Yes.
Excellent. Professor Short, it's been wonderful speaking with you. And I'm looking at the time here thinking I have engagements later. I just want to cancel the whole lot and continue speaking with you, quite frankly. We kind of like to end episodes talking about the sort of next generation, how people can get involved and things like that. Obviously, you're a professor and your work has been here for a number of years. What perhaps is your message for anyone wanting to explore these realms of cyber psychology or want to hear more from you? What perhaps can they go and do and listen to and read about?
I've got papers published, but they're really boring and often behind paywalls, unfortunately, because that's how academic publishing works. I don't know. I should do some more podcasts. I'm always open for people to get in touch. I think if you're interested in this area, doing a psychology degree, check out whether they're doing a cyber-psychology module. London Metropolitan does.
Indeed.
You know, and
Indeed.
it's because I think it is fascinating, but also you will find in this community in cyber-psychology, because it's quite a young field, there are so many people who are really generous with knowledge sharing and are open to conversations, you know, and would answer questions. So, you know, I've got stuff out there that's probably around if you Googled me and you wanted to read about bits where I've given commentary. But yeah, I think just look around, you know, check out some of the BPS websites, British Psychological website for cyber psychology, and yeah, just do a bit of exploring, because it's a really exciting field, and it's because it's young again, you can make it your own. You can pursue the interests you have in the online environment. There isn't a standard.
So many avenues to explore.
So many avenues.
Fantastic. Thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here are Detective Diaries episode on the crossover between police and private detectives in the UK. Available now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
People think it's just like the movies, Harry, kicking down doors with a warrant. But in the private sector, we don't have that blue light privilege. We have to be smarter.
Exactly that, Nigel. When I started learning the ropes, the biggest shift was the unlearning. You realise your baseline isn't just about what you can do legally, but is it moral? Is it ethical?
Yeah, and the results are often faster. A client calls because they've been waiting months for a police update on a fraud case, or waiting for the SOCO to get back to them. We can pivot, get boots on the ground, while the official paperwork is still being filed.
It's about bridging that gap between public duty and private results. We're picking up exactly where they leave off, whether it's corporate surveillance, forensic investigation, or international tracing.
It's a different world entirely. This is Detective Diaries. Listen now on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. There's a link in the notes below this trailer.
Hi, I'm Professor Emma Short, cyber psychologist at London Metropolitan University. So come and listen to me talk on Detective Diaries. We had an incredible hour talking about the online environment, how it may enable crime, when watching crosses the line and perhaps becomes snooping, and also what happens when the crowd takes control of an investigation.
Get involved. Detective Diaries is interactive, which involves you, the listener. Do you have a case you'd like discussed? A burning question about investigative life? Send an email to podcast@private-detectives.co.uk or reach out via social media. You may hear your story featured in an upcoming episode. Don't forget to leave your contact details. The email address is in the show notes.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, brought to you by Answers Investigation and UK Fingerprint. If you've enjoyed our conversation and want to learn more about the fascinating world of investigations, be sure to check out Private Detectives Answers Investigation. Their experienced team offers a wide range of discreet and professional services, helping you find the answers you need with integrity and expertise. If you're interested in fingerprint analysis or require specialist fingerprint services, don't miss UK Fingerprint. As one of the leading fingerprint companies in the UK, they provide everything from identification to background checks, working with individuals, businesses, financial institutions, and gambling companies. To find out more, visit www.private-detectives.co.uk, that's a minus sign, and www.ukfingerprint.co.uk. These are your go-to resources for investigative solutions and fingerprint expertise. You can call their office on 020 7158 0332. Thanks once again for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking the truth.